Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. All the conversations humanity will have before the inconceivable. That is the title that has found me today. And in my previous talks, just in other ideas I've developed, I have created this term. I called it the language threshold. And what it means is that there is anytime a human being has an experience that cannot be put into words, it's a moment beyond the language threshold. Now, there's certain moments in life where the person feels like an object, and so the language is limited to the observable, visible design, but there's moments where the person feels like an invisible subject, a sort of ultimate kind of the common denominator attention of every thought that arises. I was pretty much thinking that there will come a point in history where we will move where we will go towards what is inconceivable now. Many things that we are doing now as human beings was inconceivable way back. So it is very, it's like a pattern. You can totally see how many inconceivable technologies potentially may arise on this earth before even the human being gets to see it. I wanted to actually give this talk last night because the image was so vivid that for a second I was in my porch and I was looking at how right now in this very moment the whole universe is the space that we are now on this planet. There is so many conversations being had, between friends, families, various sorts of ways that the inner realms of the human being is externalizing. It's not just plants that are growing on the surface of this earth. There is ideology going on there. And what's interesting is that their ideas come from or can come from. There has been times in my life where I've noticed something like I've given 10 talks and I've noticed something in every talk, which if that thing came I keep saying that our language in education what does that mean? That means that all the now, let's say the alien wasn't telepathic or something. Object. But when you close your eyes, you appear to yourself as a subject. I mean, you are an object, but when the eyes are closed, there's no closed. Guys, my attention came on the chat section. Is the audio still a problem? It looks like it's okay from my side. I mean, I'm seeing this. Yeah, it shows it's okay from my side. So okay, hang on, guys. Let me just hear it from. Just hang on. Unfortunately, guys, I have no idea what I can do to fix the audio. Um, all right, I don't know, guys. I'm just gonna go with the talk. Let's see what happens. If my voice deserves it, it will find your ears. To continue, pretty much human beings are having a lot of conversations on this earth, and it is a very beautiful sight. It's as if, like, after some point, it's kind of very cute. The earth began speaking to itself through the human form. It began developing languages. And as I was saying, the educational system is going to come to an apocalypse of a sort of voidness to language, that the language is an imposition from our inner realms. So I feel that the biggest issue is that we are actually multidimensional beings, but we are conditioned in a civilization that can't acknowledge that multidimensionality. So that's why there is a reality we're all in, and we're all trying to be in this reality, but at the same time, there is imagination as well. You know, a conversation is like a small lifetime. When the conversation begins, you are something. When the conversation ends, you have been something, and their attention moves on. I have a prediction. I'm that guy in history making a prediction way ahead of its time. And that prediction is, potentially, I'm saying this. It could be sooner. It could be less than 600 years, or it could be as far as 10,000 years to its full fruition. But I think what it is that after some point, we will stop identifying as individuals. Because if you take it in, the human being is identifying with a part of the earth. Your body right now is a part of the earth. So we are taking responsibility for the atoms that are being physically us. I feel that this mind is has an authorization beyond the limits of its body, that it can experience its whole body to be the edge of its awareness. We are being ushered into a new era of paying attention to how communication is happening, and from this constant morality of a good and evil haunting our civilization, we will see that the good and evil are points of attention. It's as if every person, the human being, is neither good or bad. You tell me, is an infant good? Is an infant bad? No, the infant is. It just is. And it is through how the person is being to themselves, they make decisions. And these decisions direct the person to what is accepted generally to be good or bad. For example, right now, everybody's doing a podcast on what the mind is. Everybody's talking so openly about knowledge, what reality is. Like, go and see how many podcasts there are in the world. But back in the day, when Socrates came to speak about how the divine agency was not of just an image lost to a god. When Socrates pretty much spoke his own metaphysics in the streets of Athens, and somebody didn't like it, and they took him to court. And Socrates, I mean, of course, this is how Plato envisioned Socrates. Plato wasn't there actually at the death of Socrates, but he was there as his heart was there. And Plato says that it was as if Socrates had this inner oracle. And this inner oracle would tell Socrates where he should go, where he shouldn't go. Do you know what that means? That means the mind is active in the body. And when that moment happens, are you a body? You see, in the moments where there is free will, do you feel like I find it fascinating that we are so bent up on seeing to believe, but so many of our opinions on ourselves are not visible. A lot of things the human being identifies with or as is not visible. Hope is not visible. It becomes visible. Success is not visible. It becomes visible. I think like after the atheists are done with the religious people, they're going to go to every entrepreneur who has a vision of the future, and they're like, what are you doing believing in this woo-woo? And the person's like, hey man, it's like, you see, the future is woo-woo until you bring it into reality. In the tech sector, they say the best way to predict the future is to build it. And so that's the value of human design. You see, if we want to, it's a choice of directing life in accordance to the intelligence that is individual or in accordance to the awareness that is collective. Yourself appears individually to you. Unless you're a very esoteric person and you have comprehended space differently, as if space is in its own dimension and matter is in its own dimension. Right now we think space and matter are standing in the same room. We feel space is the room where matter is moving in, is it not? Right now I'm seeing that squirrel move, right? I see that squirrel creature working in accordance to its instincts. The squirrel, right now as I was looking at the tree and I'm seeing that squirrel jumped from one branch to another. Big jump. I just saw it right now as I'm speaking. So that jump, the squirrel looked and jumped. Do you know that means the squirrel has an instinctual comprehension of how to be mobile in the space. Now imagine the squirrel after 4 billion years of evolution suddenly gained consciousness. And imagine suddenly squirrels stood on their 2 feet and they started making tiny pencils and they started writing. Do you know? They started making their theories, And that's the thing. That squirrel is a relationship of nature because it has no other choice than to respond to the environment. So I feel a natural being not only because I was born from nature, but because we, in some sense, have nothing else to respond to other than nature. Do you know? I mean, a person can go in a box, but you'll see even the ostrich has to take out its head to breathe. the ostrich, when it gets scared, it's a strange animal. It puts its head in the dirt. So like a predator could be running out, and the ostrich is like, all right, I just don't want to see what happens. And the ostrich. I feel there will come a time where we will no longer be ideas. The concept of a thought, the concept of a mind will be archaic. You know, we will activate experientially, and the wisdom of the world will move as space before the matter in the space. We have feared this. We have feared the immaterial. We have feared the inconceivable. We have feared the unknown. We have feared the new. And we can't be an advanced civilization if we don't have tolerance for the better potential. Do you know how many human beings I feel it kind of was so chaotic? Oh, one day the thought came to me, the idea, this vision, this, I could see it in my inner realms, that so much of human life doesn't have a collective purpose. So little of human life has a collective purpose, you know? That means even if the person goes in their civilization, what are they going to do? At the end, they must retreat to their solitude. And so that's what I whether actors in an existential film, actors, existential film. I remember I tell you when I was thinking about what kind of actor, in some sense, what sort of actor in the realms, fascinating. Considering the film, we guys, let me go see if I can find something to fix this mic issue. I think my mic's getting old. I'll be right back, guys. Let's see what we can. Okay, guys, this should totally be better. It's a different mic. Let me know if suddenly I remembered where this mic was. So okay. Okay, let's get back to it. These microphones are like one step above like airplane airplane headphones. Yeah. Okay. What is the value of every conversation so far? It's kind of mind-boggling how many human beings have lived on this earth and in how many ways they have walked. This idea of the language threshold of going towards the inconceivable, I feel at a point in history, maybe, let's say, in a range of 600 years from now, or maybe 100 years from now, the human identification with the world will surpass individuality because we will get bored from it. For how long can we just be an individual object moving? You see, that's why we were drawn towards the information revolution. You know, because we were tired, we didn't want to just be what we saw. The sight could endlessly progress. You know, it's kind of like looking at everything you know in this life and wondering, whoa, what if that's one side of the coin? Language is a toy. At best, it's an advanced technology. There is a sort of ascension through language. There's a descension based on the story you tell. I find inner strength to be an ability to realize the value of the character you are in your own world. So as I'm sitting here speaking to you, there's a way I value myself where I know nobody has my eyes. That's my inner realms. It's like there are certain ways every human being, in a sort of strange, secret solitude, knows themselves. They're standing. You know, it's cool. I feel the general feeling is an invisible witness of a visible world because we have a first person. Our eyes are not above our head. You know, imagine like our eyes. I don't know. You can imagine like why is the eyes on the face? Why aren't the eyes above the creature? I mean, I was thinking that if we are a creature that has how would you call it?
Like a chameleon can literally its eyes can move independently. What does that mean? That means you as a human being. I mean, human beings are all different, but it's like when you look left, both your eyes move left. But when a chameleon is like its eyes are on each side of the wall. That's how a chameleon sees. So for me, the chameleon is such a unique creature because it has access to two simultaneous realities. But when we use both of our eyes to see the same thing, we have access to one reality. Can you imagine a chameleon like with its left side of its face, it's seeing a predator, with the right side of its face, it's seeing the escape route? Our evolution from an unconscious world to an unconscious self took place. Then from the unconscious self to the conscious self, that evolution also took place. We are reaching the end of the third phase, which is again the movement from the conscious self to the conscious world. Now, that movement to the conscious world means human beings are the mind, the awareness has been aware of its individualism. I mean, imagine let's just play along, entertain this notion of this transmigrating soul in Buddhism and yogic thought, that is this transmigrating soul that is endlessly incarnating. You see, it's interesting in like certain through a certain Vedic approach, this human life is a blessing because it is the best table to wonder about the universe. It's like we're in the best station, you know. But for example, in Tibetan Buddhism, reincarnating into this world is not a good sign. They're like, oh gosh, he didn't pass the course. He didn't pass the life course. The poor soul, poor eternal soul reincarnated. And I will tell this to anybody who considers reincarnation or some eternal agenda at work. Let me tell you, why should an eternal being survive? Why should an eternal being exist? One of the most, I find, uh, one of the golden questions of philosophy. Why should and if there if we're this is it's kind of like imagine I'm what I'm saying right now I'm writing on a chalkboard. I'm not, but you can imagine it. As if you see, eternity has no reason. Eternity is not an object and it is not a subject because an object and subject change. If I want to think myself to be a certain subject, I'm like, okay, this is who I am. Do you know how many days I will experience after this moment that will change that impression of me? And that was the thing. That my whole life I was avoiding that the world was living through me as well, as much as I was living through the world. And those who realize this game of one idea to rule them all stops. The mind calms down. For the first time, we begin hearing the voice of the real world. The voice of the real humanity is not a voice that's in language. It's a life sensitivity to the better ways everything can exist. The halls of the school of thought that I personally walk in, I don't consider the soul to be a person. Yeah, I'm going to say this very boldly. It's for me, what this idea of a soul is a relationship with a living unknown. You see, we are known creatures and we are alive. Now, the life is wandering through its known position. What else is there? And the only way it transforms is with the entrance of the unknown. And that's the thing. It's kind of fascinating, we found a way as a creature on this planet to have an invisible relationship with the visible, which is, everybody should clap right now, the linguistic simulation, the sophisticated way that we as creatures have an awareness to language is phenomenal. There was this man named Swami Vivekananda, if I remember. Uh, I think it's him. And Swami Vivekananda, he went to America, and this German scientist came to him and asked him a question from this certain science book. Like, asked him a scientific question from Vivekananda. Vivekananda held the book in his hand, he sandwiched the book between the palm of his hands, and he closed his eyes. Then he gave the guy an instantaneous answer, and he read the page from a book that he didn't even open. And the guy was like, "What is this?" You know? Either Swami Vivekananda is like this secret scientist trying to be a yogi, or in some sense, there is something else about how information moves. I feel there was this book I wrote in 2015. I called it Memories of Starlight, and the whole point of it was that I felt we're all light. That means right now, as I'm simultaneously being a biological body, but because I am identifying as an attention with the visible, the light is what is visible. So I was thinking that when the ancient Egyptians were like, you know, they were worshiping the sun, everybody was like, look at these fools worshiping the sun, blinding themselves. But those fools, those incredibly wise fools, had noticed the breath of the mind is light. The same way your body needs oxygen, your lungs breathe through oxygen, your mind evokes through light and the echoes of light. Because I have studied this memory. You think you can be a human being on this planet and not wonder about what the mind is? I have wondered about so many things in order to physically continue and survive in this world. And it's like eventually you study the physical phenomena of your moment, you find a certain comfort and contentment with it, and a sign of contentment is really beauty. When something is beautiful for you, you don't fear it. That means fear has 100% dismantled when something becomes beautiful. This is why they say it's like the fool goes into paradise first, and people were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa! How's the fool going into paradise first?" Because the fool didn't know enough to be bad. That's the reality. That's the kind of mystical virtue they speak about, where there's a virtue where the child has, the young child, you know? The young child's virtue is it doesn't know. It doesn't know what's out there, so it's pure inner realms. You know? That means when children are mistreated by the world they are being raised in, how can I tell you? It's like, don't hit a child when it's young, because that child could grow up and become a world leader and hit nations. So don't slap a child. That child might slap nations in the future. You know? We have examples of this in history. even though there was this mentality where I laughed so hard when I was in Iran, and I saw it in a TV show in Iranian television, which had like 4 channels. And in one of those channels, it was showing this film where this grandmother was shouting to her son to hit her daughter, and the grandmother was saying, "Hit your daughter now, so you in the future you don't hit yourself." And I don't know. It was this idea that back in the day, the reason they were super strict with children, just the educational system was even super strict, was because they felt if the child gets introduced to an organized strictness, they won't get introduced to that strictness in a disorganized way. But this notion of virtue was that the child doesn't know better, but the mystic. The mystic was the being that had seen, that had not closed its eyes to the world. You know, you can't cover your eyes and think you're gonna get to the right place. In this world, you got to look at things. That's the first fear that you have to get away. That regardless of what opinion there is on any object, any event, any idea, you are your sight. You have access to the new way of seeing it. That means, like, there are some people who they don't go looking for creativity. Let me tell you like this. It's exactly what I experienced after film school. Before film school, I loved films. I loved watching films. But after film school, there came this different interest where I would see every film and I would kind of see what's going on behind the scenes. And that would take away from the hype, you know? That means people don't realize it. A good film is like a magic act where they don't see how the magician made it. But when you see how the magician does the trick doesn't become that exciting for you. You know? So similarly, it's the same I find with that second virtue, that second mystical virtue, where the person has seen, has fearlessly looked at what's in front of them. They're like, okay, let me see. I'm alive once. You know, it's like basic human right. You can look around. That second virtue, where it's kind of, I guess, poetically for Western civilization, it would be going through hell and back. You know, I don't know how many people know this, but Dante Alighieri, this Italian uh, writer and poet, he pretty much gave an image to hell and heaven. And in his vast poetic work, it's about this man, Dante, where he loses his love of his life, Beatrice, and Beatrice is taken down into the different levels of hell. And as Dante goes through these levels, Dante, in some sense, experiences the messed up sins of man. So that's kind of thing where in this world, um, you can tell there's some human beings who are in the front lines, and there's some human beings who are standing in the bunker and in the safe zones. That means I feel all humanity, all conversations are retaliations against the unknown. It is efforts to find meaning in the world. And I feel that society doesn't understand the vastness of the emotions that the human being can experience if you stop identifying with a certain format. We look at life, we see things are seasonal. You know, I would tell people that if this whole identity issue in both Eastern and Western civilization, it's pretty much a human problem where we're wondering how do we identify with this phenomena that is being here? How do we identify with our creaturehood? Do we identify our persona only in accordance to what is, or do we become materialists in our own personal identity, or do we become immaterialists in the personal identity? What does that mean? That means there's some people who they find themselves, like this is very common in today's world. There are some people who find themselves, they are born male, but the person, for example, feels female, you know? Or there's a person who's born female, the person feels they're male, you know? Carl Jung spoke about this as the anima and the animus. That means whatever you do in this life, there is a moment where the mind is attempting to be everything, you know? So that means in human psychology, the imagery that's around you is what you have to work with. So if you are a child, believe it or not, I feel the mind subconsciously is experiencing everything as a world, and also from that subjective realm classifying its individualism. Right? So first you see something and then you identify. Right? The whole thing about identity is we have to see something to identify. So if you see something more out of the same thing, your identity technically has changed. You don't identify in the same way. It's like this. Every day I give these talks, the way I feel about myself as a person, as someone using language, is different. You know? The first couple hundred talks, maybe there was an excitement. Yo, let's run for this. Afterwards, I realized that you can't do a big project with big hope. You can't do it. That means Elon Musk gave a good algorithm to this, that some people are like, yo, I want to succeed, run towards success. And there's some people who are like, hey man, there's success and there's failure, so let me try to reduce the percentage of failure. Let me assume if it fails, that means it's nothing. Everything's come to a zero valuation. This is why you should start a business when you have another try. A second, you have also saved for your own second chance, you know? Because the business has a probability. Everything, it's like, I was talking to someone and I was like, I'm so fascinated that what are they teaching in business schools around the world? And I do understand that it's complex. If you want to talk about the management of a business and an organization or some sort of entity, even life, your survival is how you're managing yourself. You're an employer of your own existence. You're an employer and employee of your own existence. And discipline is how well the employee listens to the employer as the self, you know? So you see, management is you need the structure first, and the manager has rules to maintain. Managers, for me, they are like the justice system of the company. You know, they are like the firemen and the police officers and the important people, the judges of that. If we were to see a business as a society, you know. But there was this quote that said very incredibly that there's some people that the manager's task is to climb the ladder properly, but the leader's task is to place the ladder on the right wall. And that's where I want people's attention to really go to. That how are all these conversations that is all human beings on this earth are having, where are they leading? If language was the only guide of man's attribute-filled spirit, where is language taking this civilization? And I am telling you, it's taking it nowhere. Did you know? Did you know? Did you know that all the great speakers, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, all the leaders in history, they knew they were walking on thin ice. And the task of the future generations is to solidify and stabilize that ice. That means there may come a point where the ice breaks, you know? And this concept of, pulling the rug from underneath someone's feet, do you know how strong you gotta be to do that? I'm Persian. I tried that. Trust me. And mysticism is like you consciously, with the study of your unconscious, pulling the rug from underneath your feet just to give yourself a chance to see what was before the language. Who were you before everybody or you yourself gave yourself an opinion? So I feel the inconceivable cannot be contained as a location. So I feel we were energy that wasn't aware of its shape, and right now we're energy that's aware of its shape, and we're in the future going to be energy that's no longer aware of its shape, or has maybe moved beyond it. There's this Cherokee uh, person. There was the story I read online where this missionary priest goes to this native person and says, "You have to believe in Jesus Christ or you'll go to hell." Something of the sort. And the native says, uh, uh, "Do children go to hell?" Something like that. Do children go to hell? And the priest is like, "No, children don't go to hell." And then the person's like, "Why?" And the person's like, "Because they don't know about Jesus Christ." And so the native is like, "Why did you tell me then?" And that story was so heavy. It was so heavy how there is constant language infiltrate. I can't say infiltration. Language is living a life in your subconscious. And unless the person can realize they're not a thought, if you dare to have some sort of esoteric desire, you're going to see it's going to be a fool's errand. It's a fool's errand because to go with the unknown with an image. The image gives you the unknown. Anybody going to the unknown with a preference, with an opinion, I have no idea what those people are doing. I don't, there is no agenda. Let me tell you, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says, if the person chooses to see a deity, chooses to see a god, chooses to conclude that the absoluteness of their moment is just one image or shape or form or archetype, that person in the afterlife will be guided by that archetype. So in certain polytheistic traditions, for example, you see in India, even though on the surface it's polytheistic, at its core it's like the Parabrahman. Everything's the Parabrahman. So that's a great misunderstanding that many people think there's a polytheism outside of a singularity originating that polytheism. That means you don't suddenly see the tree has branches. There's the trunk, and then from the trunk, from this singular point, stretches. And I'm telling you, it's this constant relationship of an oscillation between the multidimensional, the dual, the singular, and the void. And if you can confront these four states of mind, I feel you are uh, potentially you have your intuition has may bless you with the pilot's cap. That means a pilot is when the responsibility of existence over the experience and the responsibility of the experiencer over the existence is simultaneously equal. What does that mean? That means it's like right now, Mr. Within is telling you a story just to tell you what was there before the story. Honestly, for me, reality is just endless alphabets. Some of these alphabets are through image. Some of them are symbolic, they're abstract. Everything is a means of communication and relationship with the inner realm and the outer realm. And your inner realm, I feel personally, because everybody has a different DNA and a different upbringing, you don't know. Nobody on this planet knows how fascinating your inner realms can be. Only you have your eyes, which means only you can honor your own being. That means whatever happens by the external realm, I treat the external realm. If the attention is on me, I'm like, how well do people see me? And the moment I see someone who can't see me for me, I become non-existent to them. That means I become really silent. There's nothing to say when the world is blind. I think the greatest thing parents can teach the future generations is that they are a value system that shifts in accordance to how the person chooses. You see, we say, we have, for example, surgeon neurologists speaking about free will being an illusion. Now, if free will is an illusion, who's driving the vehicle in the highway? You know, isn't it? It's like, I didn't know an illusion has such great driving skills, you know? It's an interesting time. I feel the mind of the human species, humanity, has matured from the confrontation of the first duality, which is something and nothing. This is the first, like, curiosity of the mind. It's like, what is here? What isn't? You know? And then the second thing is, after you have confronted the void and the singular, you have a relationship with the singular and the dual. What does that mean? That means you see the potential of your own chaotic intent, and you see the potential of your organized intent, but as the Buddha said, you also see the neutrality of the moment before the decision. And the greatest thing I feel the future generations can keep in mind is that, you know how they say, attack the head of the snake? That means, like, it was a militaristic tactic and military strategy where you had to cut the head of the snake. What that means is the leader that was in power, once the leader was gone, then the rest, there was no, like, issue. It was a military, it was like back in the day, I don't know, thousands of years ago, Sun Tzu times, you know. So here's the thing, the snake is not stupid. When you are attacking the head of the snake knows that it's like the snake attacks the heart. We attack the head of the snake attacks the heart of man. And this is a metaphor, guys. Don't try to see too much into what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's a metaphor. It's a militaristic tactic, really. So what does that mean? That means the heart of man is where the motivation arises from. Even the existential motivation is arising from the heart. What that means, overall, let's say all the rational observations and all the irrational observations that in all the conversations that human beings have ever had on this planet that have sent forth some pattern and echo. Believe it or not, I feel conversations, the moment they are vocalized, they become subtler particles and they are orbiting around the earth. We don't realize it. There is a version of the earth that has no atmosphere, and that's where our imaginations are existing. I feel poetically. You see, where can an idea go? Every idea is like an object where you're looking at it from different angles. So, as far as I'm concerned, intelligence is how all your memories have given you an access to a landscape of realism. And so it is up to you to pilot your intelligence. It's not something to learn. It is not something that it can be taught. It is just at some point you will watch the sky and you will want to move beyond the clouds. And that's it. If that feeling comes to you, don't seek any metaphysics. The metaphysics, there's a time it will end. Did you know that? Meditation is not meant to be the whole life. If you're meditating your whole life, you haven't understood meditation. You are trying to live as a photo to yourself. Meditation is participation and trust of the unknown variables, or you won't live. You will die in your comfort zone if you choose to even decide comfort. I decided that my comfort zone was uncomfortable. Then it was an eradication of comfort zone. That means I was like, the point of this life is not for me to shelter myself in the storm. It's like a human being that has never experienced rain, and every time it's rained, the human being has ran. The human beings notice the storm, and one day the person's like, and imagine it's a hot, humid place, and the person's overheating, even though it's raining, but the person is afraid of the rain. And let's say somebody says, hey man, just go in the rain, and the person's like, I'm afraid of the storm. The person goes in the rain and feels the texture of a new dimension. You are the greatest tool at your disposal. You are... Let me tell you, the mind is so advanced. Let me tell you this. All the memories you have as a human being, and if you're older, you have a higher advantage. You're going to be catapulted much further. Let me tell you what I mean by this. The relationship with identity is like you are something, like that's honor, where you are something before you do something. And you are aware of what you are before you do. If you're not aware of your own value before you do something, the unconscious will value you. There was this meme I saw on Facebook where it was this picture and it showed two sides of the picture. So the picture was divided, the frame was divided in half, and in one side of it, it showed there is a young girl with standing, and there is a savage kind of like violent person who's tied to a chair, with his hands are back in the chair. Okay, and so you see this like young girl smiling, this very innocent girl. It's a cartoon picture, I mean, and you see this innocent girl smiling, and you see this kind of very vicious looking person with his hands behind the chair. And the next part of the photo, it shows you that behind the hands of the guy is, behind the hands of the girl is a knife, is this knife with blood on it, and behind the hands of the criminal-looking guy, where his hands are behind the chair, there is a bouquet of flowers. And it was showing that the appearance is not the depth. That every human being you have ever seen on this life, you have only seen the tip of the iceberg of who they really were to themselves. This acknowledgement ushers forth an advanced civilization, when you can realize that without space nothing can be built. Even if you're an employer, okay, even if right now you're running a company, the efficiency of your company is how much space the poor employee feels. That means it's as if like there is something that people don't realize. Genius is shy. Genius is super shy. And only when there is 100% freedom, genius will attempt its 100%. But that 100% must come from a dimension of passion. There are employees that can't wait to get to work, and there are employees that can't wait to leave work. Those employees that can't leave work, they are wasting the company's time, and they're wasting their own time. They're living days where their passion is in just moving in their inner realms. You see, that's why I'm saying civilization is like a fax machine. It is not updated. It is not efficient. And the only way it can be efficient is, for now, global dialogue on a massive level. Whoever you are, whether you are a parent, go home and talk to your kids and wonder about how your children are looking at the world. You know, the thing is, we judge each other as concepts before truly understanding how we are appearing as a context to ourselves. That means if let's say, person A and person B, they're walking in the park and they sit in that park. Okay? Person A has a world. Person B has a world. Now, if person A devalues himself. Person A doesn't realize the value of the context to their life, and person B doesn't realize the value of the context of the life. The life will change. All this whole thing about personalities being alphas, they're being betas. No, there's just freaking wolves. That's it, and it's a system. And it's nature. Nature is the alpha male. Nature, the whole thing, the whole moment. And the being who has awareness to the whole moment obviously sees more. There were many things I would try. One of the first lessons, early lessons I got, I think I was like, what was I? Maybe like 10. I remember sorry guys, I don't remember the accurate age, but I remember my face and the memory. Probably at that time I didn't even consider age. You know, children don't see numerology, you know. You know, at least one thing, you know, if your child doesn't like maths, they are at least they don't feel ageism that much. Anyways. Where was I going with this? Gosh. I think I giggled too hard. I missed the train of thought. Oh, okay, yeah, here. I have this, I'm sharing with you a memory as a human being. I remember my father had taught me chess, So there would be these Persian gatherings where I was like this maybe 9-year-old kid, and there was all these adults just sitting in this giant room. And so in Iranian homes, there's a part of the house where it's untouched and it's kept like luxurious and pristine, and the rest of the house is like normal. So whenever guests come, it's like it's like you just the house is already ready. If a visitor comes out of nowhere in your home, you have a place in your house ready for visitors, and you always invite the visitor there. It's an epic system, like in regards to interior design. But anyways, so there was this huge gathering at my grandmother's house, and I was this little kid. I had this plastic chessboard which had magnet kind of chess pieces, and I would hold that chessboard in my hand, and I would go one by one to the guests of that gathering and be like, "Do you want to play chess? Do you want to play chess?" And maybe out of the first 10 people who would say no, one person who was bored in the gathering would say, "Sure, I'll play chess." Like this random kid out of nowhere is playing chess and everybody's seated, because there is an inefficiency to the seating formation of gatherings. When it's not like each table. It's just like there's, I don't know, the people beside you are the people you know. But anyways, so I remember I played chess, and I reach a point where I defeat this guy. I was like 9; he was much older. Uh, he was a friend of a family member who was bored. He was new to the place, so nobody was like maybe talking to him or something. So anyways, I played, and I remember I hit his queen, and I got her. As a 9-year-old version of me was like, "Oh shit, I did a good move," right? You know. So I was winning the game, and then I had this sort of innocent child compassion. I'm like, "Do you want the piece back?" And the guy's looking at me. He's like, "You sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I gave the guy the piece back, and I lost the game. And that was a moment where that moment passed. I didn't even care, you know. I went on and I just asked somebody else to play. For me, it was I didn't have too much even. Like, sometimes you can master a skill by not having an opinion on it and just going through the action. Going through the activity. So yeah, and there I realized that it's like it was kind of strange because it was it what seemed to be good didn't have a good result. But years later, I got a different view on the same thing, that it was good because I was the able warrior. That means it was a situation where I noticed I felt great. It was a test. It was test it was a testament to my fearlessness, the compassion I'm trying to say, you know. All right, guys. There's gonna be a 1 minute, few minute break because I gotta put a chair behind my computer so the sun doesn't. So just a quick break. I'll be back, guys. Okay, so I'm back, guys. Thanks for waiting. This idea of just trying to fathom what's happening and where all these conversations on this planet are leading. Right now, as I'm speaking, you know how many other people are speaking? And so there's different directions you can communicate for another communicator to another communicator. You can communicate to your world, and you can also communicate to yourself. There was this poet named Attar. He speaks about this idea of a phoenix. He gives the concept of phoenix. He animates it in his poetry, in a way where he says that all the birds. His poetry collection is called "The Conference of the Birds," and he says, all the birds in the world decided to gather together and fly and find this ultimate phoenix. That means it's like the birds had heard there's this ultimate bird, and we have to go find this ultimate bird. So all the birds in the world flew into the sky, and they flew in the same direction. Can you imagine that? Like this poet's inner realms. This guy wrote this like 700 years ago or something. Attar of Misho. Attar says that these birds, all the birds, and instead of birds, you can even envision human beings. All the birds, the minds of human beings, you know. All the birds flew into the sky, and the journey began to find this phoenix. And over time, many of the birds got tired. They're like, "There's no phoenix. What is this bird doing?" You know. And many of the birds flying in the sky, they stopped. They stopped the search. And at the end, there were only 30, what do you call it, birds left. These birds, out of their wonder, as if these 30 birds had realized they're immortal. So let us find this phoenix. What else is there? What other game is there to play? Attar says, suddenly it dawns on these 30 birds that they are the phoenix. And that's the moral of the story. And that's why in Farsi, they call the phoenix Seymour, 30 birds. It's very fascinating. Different cultures have different ways where they animated their ultimatums to life. So I feel if we can see all the conversations occurring on this planet, all efforts of all advanced communicators existent, currently in this plane of existence, I feel that we should conclude. I mean, I'm just kind of getting the inspiration to say this now, but I feel we should stretch it down to 30 important conversations, and basic education would be to answer these 30 questions. That means we have to create a global community. Imagine like 8 billion people suddenly they got interested in these 30 important questions. And these 30 important questions, I mean, I just thought of kind of, fractalizing this ancient story, this ancient myth into a sort of modern approach. But the whole idea was, it's like those who endure, there is something about the destiny of the strong. They find themselves in a strong world. That means if you feel weak, you're going to look at everybody and you're going to feel they feel weak too. But if you feel observant, you will suddenly notice everybody is observant to a certain degree. There's many things I can't see, you know. It's like I'm telling you, if we engage with this concept that it's like our inner realms are a vehicle for this presence of attention, which is energy being conscious of itself. Because I was like, let me tell you, you look at religion, they're saying God can't be created or destroyed. And everything is the will of God. So when the world transforms, it's like God's will, in the religious context. And you go and look at it from a scientific lens, and they say energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only change from one form to another, and suddenly there's come potential energy and kinetic energy and various ways of interpreting how energy is changing. Right, so it suddenly I was like, what are these? How are it's like they're the same concept, a sort of something that is being reduced, like the origin of both worldviews, whether scientific religion, is something that cannot be created or destroyed. And that's the thing. That's the thing, that it's interpretation on energy. We are every view, even right now, me looking at something, this feels like artwork. Why does it feel like artwork? Because I see the sensory perception. I'm seeing all this stuff here, my environment, but how that environment means something to me, it has to compare with an inner environment that I considered before. That means that moment you step into a new room, you know, let's say you step on stage, that's like stepping into a portal. That's stepping into a different acknowledgement of how the moment is being. So I think the best thing to say is we are energy and we are conscious, and due to this consciousness, we have reinterpreted the energy in various ways. That means I'm pretty sure every person will agree there's energy. you know? Because they need to have energy to agree with you. There was something I noticed that we are a design-oriented creature before we are. Jesus Christ, this bee is too close to me. Hold on, guys. Sorry guys, location problems. But anyways. I feel I should have given this talk indoors. I think it's too hot outside. Okay. The conversation or any sort of dialogue, or if in the future we envision a global network where we have acknowledged the mind is the most valuable resource and we've created this sort of, again, global digital coliseum where the greatest ideas are being gravitated towards the center. You know, where it's no longer people fighting, but it is inner realms advancing, whether it's being challenged or not. Whenever a person challenges another, the best challenge is a challenge of skill. Because it has nothing to do with the story. This thing I was saying about we are designers, that means it's like the child is aware of design before it has a meaning for the design. Like an infant can look at a bottle of orange juice and have no idea that's called orange juice. You see, but the child has access to the design, so there's a designer level of engagement. So when you go to at least notice phenomenology that is considered subjective or your inner realm, or just pretty much the question where language is leading, we have to look at the design, the implication of the design of our inner life. Now, human beings value themselves very differently. You know, one day you may feel like you're a good person, one day you may feel like a bad person, one day you may feel even beyond the person, whatever. You know, it's this constant change. The design changes and the meaning based on the design change comes into place. So like that could mean a tree, but if suddenly somebody cuts down that tree, there's no longer a tree there. You know, now I just see the space of the tree or notice the absence of the tree. So I'm asking this question, where language is leading us, well, we know where we are leading language. We're constantly trying to update and advance, you know? We are an evolutionary species after all. That evolution is not limited to just objective. It's like an objective evolution strangely led to a creature, an objective creature becoming a subject to itself. How strange, you know? How strange that a monkey how a chimp became aware that it was a chimp. How strange. What is the value of human life beyond how language is turning it into a story? I think that value will be an introduction again to the unknown. So if we treat ourselves as known in certain states of mind and unknown in certain states of mind, and we can discriminate between the known and the unknown, then the known can advance. Because Carl Jung said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But here's the strange thing: how could the conscious not be conscious of the unconscious? If it like, you have to acknowledge the edge of your meaning at some point. The edge of how far you can see into a phenomenon. So the ultimate evolution of language is towards its inconceivability, which I think would be an acknowledgement of we're experiencing comfortably a multidimensional arena. That means if you think, imagine like there's so many potential planets out there in the galaxy, and imagine one of those planets, there was a civilization similar to Earth, but the only difference was that this civilization was the opposite. Right now, everybody is speaking, we need to communicate, but this civilization, imagine, was telepathic. And this civilization was silent externally, but everybody knew. And it was a behavior of a mind. It was a relationship of intelligence as a field. Even in like the digital sense of looking at it, it's like that's what the cloud mind is. The cloud hive mind. Imagine in 40 years, there's technology that once incorporated with the brain, you can never forget anything, and everything you wanted to know would instantly be there. You know? Guys, I'm going to go into a quote tunnel, and just to see what people have said about language. Okay, guys, I found the proper website. So let's enter the quote tunnel. Let's just see how people have perceived the idea of language. Dale Jamieson. We think of history as another specialization, like philosophy of language, rather than as something that informs everything we do and think. Umberto Eco says, as a scholar, I am interested in the philosophy of language, semiotics, call it what you want, and one of the main features of the human language is the possibility of lying. Ludwig Wittgenstein says, philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language. Wow. Yeah. Ludwig Wittgenstein just backhanded civilization's ignorance with that quote. Auguste Comte says, the word right in quotations should be excluded from political language, as the word cause in quotations from the language of philosophy. John Langdon says language, philosophy, and science are interwoven into the design of words, which are manipulated to create surprising illusions. Bertrand Russell says, I remain convinced that obstinate addiction to ordinary language in our private thoughts is one of the main obstacles to progress in philosophy. What an incredible quote. Our obstinate addiction to ordinary language in our private thoughts. That means you want to stay in a subjective comfort zone. You know? I feel people should share this in like social media. I'm going to share it in the chat section. Maurice Drouin says, Italian is the language of song, German is good for philosophy, and English for poetry. French is best at precision. It has a rigor to it. Jacques Derrida says, in Algeria I had begun to get into literature and philosophy. I dreamed of writing, and already models were instructing the dream. A certain language governed it. What an interesting quote. A certain language governed it. That means like the ambition, the vision, the inspiration is a narrative. It's perhaps a sub-narrative that is fragmented between various senses of self in accordance to how the moment relates to the past. But you can see a model to things. I definitely see a blueprint before I give these talks. I conclude a certain overall observation over the talk, and then I just give the talk. But that conclusion is more like a question. So I'm like at the beginning of the talk asking a question, and then at the end of the talk trying to see what happened to that question. You know. Natasha Trethaway says, I'm interested in 18th century natural philosophy, science, particularly botany, the study of hybridity in plants and animals, which of course then allow me to consider the hybridity of language. Wow. Well said. What a profound quote. The hybridization in nature, also the hybridization in language. That even though we feel our intelligence is kind of off-putting to other species, we're like the aliens on Earth compared to all the other animals. Like people are looking at all the animals like, why are you guys so slow? But we are too quick. You know, some interesting event occurred for this unique species. And it's kind of fascinating to feel that you're in a species right now. You're a creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere. Like that's as surreal as it gets, really. a creature on a rock in the middle of nowhere that is defining its own reality. Like, you know, you wanted to see the illusion, you found it. John Liu says there's a diversity of thought and philosophy, diversity of languages and dialects, diversity of political spectrum, and there's a diversity of taste for food. I don't label or characterize. Ravi Zacharias says two of the chief defenders of the faith in the Old Testament and in the New, Moses and Paul, were both well versed in the language, the thinking, and the philosophy of their cultures. Okay, this guy seems to have access to a time machine, you know. But it does make sense. The language of the people is not just the language, it's experience. How are people experiencing life? That's a totally different than a conceptual analysis of people. Thomas Reid says, a philosopher is, no doubt, entitled to examine even those distinctions that are to be found in the structure of all languages. In that case, such a distinction may be inputted to a vulgar error, which ought to be corrected in philosophy. Okay, let me see. A philosopher... It has 3 dots, so this is not the full quote. Gosh. Like, really? This guy didn't share the full quote? That are to be found in the structure of all languages. So that means all philosophers are allowed to find the origin, the source of language. And then he says, in that case, such a distinction may be inputted to a vulgar error, which ought to be corrected in philosophy. So if we have freedom to examine, then we have a freedom to have an error. So there is like a freedom for the efficient action and the inefficient and the efficient action. There's a freedom for both. So sometimes, so he's pretty much saying, like Thomas Reid is saying, like, you have a freedom to look at things efficiently, but you have to be careful it doesn't result into something inefficient, for example. And I don't know how that's really possible if the voice is surpassing the lifetime. Ludwig Wittgenstein says the sole remaining task for philosophy is the analysis of language. There we go. General giving orders to humanity. Ludwig Wittgenstein. I'm going to share this quote, guys. Please share this on your social media. Okay. Henry Bergson says there's nothing in philosophy which could not be said in everyday language. I totally disagree with that. Michael Sayers says the only philosophy is that of language. The only religion is that of the word. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Michael Sayers is saying the only philosophy is that of language. The only religion is that of the word. I mean, that's... So philosophers are just like how, let's say, a nature photographer is zooming in on like a wild animal in nature, a zoologist or something. Like, philosophers are like zoologists for thoughts, if thoughts could be seen as the movement of language throughout the whole species. That means if there was a computer screen with code on it, that code would be how every person on this planet is functioning in a sort of ideological sequence. That means you have a value, then you see other value, then you move towards something, the values change, the value stabilizes, the value changes, the value stabilizes, and pretty much we breathe our way through this life. Auguste Comte says the word right should be... Oh, I read that. Ludwig Wittgenstein says philosophy may in no way interfere with the actual use of language. It can in the end only describe it. Philosophy may in no way interfere with the actual use of language. Yeah, because the symbols don't have life. Language is just, it's symbols. Symbols are like inner images. You know, so there's a sort of constant image comparison going on in any human being reevaluating any situation. And to discriminate that your mind is, I got a clue for this like this. I had a dream. In the dream, I was moving. I could move wherever I wanted, and I was a person in the dream, and I was running faster than I could in real life. In the dream. And I woke up in a shock because I realized my body was inactive in my bed, but my mind had made a body which I felt I was, and I was moving in, and it was real in the dream. My free will was very real to me in the dream. I can even remember it right now, the exact dream state. The exact dream state. I can remember the movement. So I woke up, and then I'm like, wait a minute, so you're telling me whether my body is active or inactive, could the mind potentially be performing 24/7? That means the mind was living a life. So it's kind of like waking up and being like, did the dream end, and realizing it's as if like two layers placed on one another, you know? It's as if we get two glass tiles, and we, with a marker, one with a red marker, write something, and with a blue marker, let's say with a right marker, we draw a square, and with a red marker, we draw a circle, okay, or something like that. Okay, let's say a blue square and a red circle, for example. And then you put these two glass tiles, and you look at them, and it's as if they're upon one another. So it's like it's a sort of calling for the species, every person, because nobody has your eyes. You have to study your own mind's mystery, and that's the truth of it. Really, there's nothing to teach. You're a creature. It's like what can you be taught? It's your choices. You're processing how you have even declared your energy in this realm. A lot of people don't declare that. These people think that passion just has to come automatically. Did you know passion is a retaliation of the inner child? Let's continue with the quote tunnel. Edward Gibbon says Greek is a musical and prolific language that gives a soul to the objects of sense and a body to the abstractions of philosophy. I like that. Guys, Greek culture is very fascinating. I mean, every culture, just how minds moved on this earth is fascinating to kind of like observe. Frank Sinatra, I have said my philosophy. I'm a backyard philosopher, I guess. Is that the dirtiest word in the English language? Oh no, sorry. I'll read that again. I've said my philosophy. I'm a backyard philosopher, I guess. Is that the dirtiest word? Is that the dirtiest word in the English language? Is retirement. I guess is not the dirtiest word in the English language. Is retirement. I mean, you can't really tell an energetic being to stop expressing. It's just the expression should readjust to a different level of contribution. You know? It's like after the person has lived one career, the person hops into another career. You know? James Jordan's says the biblical worldview is not given to us in the discursive and analytical language of philosophy and science, but in rich and compact language of symbolism and art. Yeah. George Sand says punctuation has its own philosophy, just as style does, although not as language does. Style is a good understanding of language. Punctuation is a good understanding of style. Style has to do with the inner realms moving before the outer realms. If the outer realms move, then it's. What I mean by that is that you see how the lion has to kill its own prey to feel like it can eat it. It has to trust its own hand. So I also see it that it's like when it comes to style, it's something very similar where you're trusting the hand of your vision. You know, your how attention is presenting the anime. Laura Pulver says, I got a bit obsessed with the whole English language and was writing journals and poetry. I've always been intrigued about psychology and philosophy and how people's minds work. Mark Twain says, kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. The Dalai Lama says, this is my simple religion. There's no need for temples, no need for complicated philosophy. Our own brain, our own heart is our temple. The philosophy is kindness. The Dalai Lama is too kind. Virginia Woolf says language is wine upon the lips. Samuel Johnson says language is the dress of thought. Martin Luther King Jr. says a riot is the language of the unheard. Wow, that explains a lot. Like right now what's going on in the news. And that's the issue. That means dialogue is the solution. It's like when the minds are each in their own world, no negotiation can take place. Only when the person is willing to co-create from both sides, from both parties at the table, negotiating table, that it's like it's possible, you know? Dan Brown says language can be very adept at hiding the truth. William Arthur Ward says a warm smile is the universal language of kindness. Mark Twain, I read that. Nelson Mandela, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Wow. Ludwig Wittgenstein says, language disguises thought. There we go. Ralph Waldo Emerson says language is fossil poetry. John Maynard Smith says language changes very fast. Eric Qualman says language is always evolving. Gilbert Hyatt says language is a living thing. Richard Rodriguez says language is a social event. Says Czesław Milos says language is the only homeland. George Carlin says language always gives you away. Exactly. The way your mind animates vision, that's literally when a person communicates, it's like an open mind. You know, it's like an octopus where its skin color changes and others can see how the inner realms are functioning. Storm Jameson says language is memory and metaphor. Willard Van Orman Quine says language is a social art. Mason Cooley says language cannot say everything, fortunately. Ralph Waldo Emerson, language is the archives of history. I like that. That's a good call. Eric Hoffer says language was invented to ask questions. Terence McKenna, language betrays in order to mean. Wow. The sacrifice of the language for the meaning. That means when when lovers are talking, it's like it's not the language. The language is being sacrificed for the actual emotions that are intended. You know. So I'm going to share this quote in the chat section. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry says language is the source of misunderstandings. Jerry Hawkins says language is the best toy. Kenneth Burke says language does our thinking for us. Don Watson says language is butchered by the media. John Green says language buries but does not resurrect. L. Ron Hubbard says music is indeed the universal language. Richard Chenevix Trench says language is the close-fitting dress of thought. Jackson Katz says language usage always has a political context. Wilhelm von Humboldt says language makes infinite use of finite media. Jeanette Winterson says language is what stops the heart exploding. Oh my god. Badass. William Golding says language fits over experience like a straitjacket. Maurice Merleau-Ponty says language transcends us and yet we speak. Wow. That's a great one. Iris Murdoch, language is a machine for making falsehoods. Marshall McLuhan, language is a form of organized stutter. Thomas B. Macaulay says language is the machine of the poet. I like that. Frederick Lindman says language is the medium of our thoughts. William Stafford says language can do what it can't say. Leves Vygotsky says language is the tool of the tools. Yeah, I totally agree. I see it as an advanced technology, one of the most advanced technologies. Irfan Khan says language does not make one an elite. Kurt Tucholsky says language is a weapon, keep it honed. William S. Barrow says language is a virus from outer space. Oh man. Bell Hook says language is also a place of struggle. John Stuart Mill, language is the light of the mind. That's an incredible quote. Alright, this quote page is too long, guys. I can't do this. This is too long. Oliver Wendell Holmes says, language is the blood of the soul into which thoughts run and out of which they grow. Ralph Waldo Emerson says language is a city to the building of which every human being brought a stone. Wow, wow. I think Ralph Waldo Emerson, I've read a lot of his other quotes, and he was so far-sighted, as if he was so close to nature's wisdom that nature had opened the door of his eyes. You see, either you want to do something in this world or you want something to be done. But in pure being, there is no owner. When you're still and silent, it's just being. We can say that all human conversations are occurring between one axis, which is the known and the unknown, and the other axis is they're pointed towards objects or subjects. And each subject and object has a known and an unknown. That means right now, I'm aware of my objective self, and I'm aware of how there's galaxies I can't see. Like, I can't see what's going on in the Andromeda Galaxy right now. At least with these eyes. I'm joking. But you see, I know, I acknowledge the unknownness of the object. I notice that so many human beings will come and look at the same things I looked and totally see new dimensions. That's the nature of the world. Eyes are just taking shifts of building a civilization. It's honestly, we're ants. We're ants building a civilization. And the ants, they just have individualism in the driver's seat. Gaston Bachelard says, a special kind of beauty exists, which is born in language, of language, and for language. So we have to think that usually, communication is you're expressing through yourself in relation to how much you've seen the world. But I'm feeling the best thing that conversations can lead, like there is 8 billion plus people on this planet, and out of this 8 billion, a majority are speaking, communicating, trying to do something, moving around on the surface of Earth. Now, their communication, language's property is that it's, again, like your inner realms. It's a world over a world. It's a world, it's like the meaning is not physical, but it's visible in subjective design. Like I can see, I can visualize like the leaves of the tree being a different color instantly. I can visualize all of them being like orange, you know? And that visualization, though, is not the tree. The tree's leaves are the same color. It's upon the objective realm. So language, all these conversations are inner realms and with considerations to the outer realms evoking on the surface of the earth. What does that mean? that means, believe it or not, conversations are born, and they also die if they're not maintained, if they can't survive. So when you saw two philosophers in the school of Athens debate it out, that was a moment where if their debate was long, the language was like it was a gladiator sort of arena for the inner realms to conclude the positioning of reality. You know, we have to prepare for all possibilities, and all possibilities that we're aware of at least. You know, it's a strange time. Back in the day, you had to be a warrior. If you were interested in the inner realms, they'd be like, "This guy doesn't understand how cruel the world is," you know. But now we've entered civility, and we're just kind of living in a mechanical civilization. That means most people they're hoping that their work is just a simple process. They go literally like they go to work, and everything they do is like a button they press successfully, and they come home, and I don't think that's the healthiest way to work, because any work requires energy, and energy wants something in return, right? If the energy is not balanced, if the company is not paying the employee properly in accordance to the effort of the employee, then the employee is going to feel it's losing. So there's so many people in society going and having minimum wage jobs, and they are losing. They are coming home feeling they lost something. That all the amount of their energy, you know, that means I'm not saying that labor tasks are, we should suddenly be very minimalistic and just see them as like, just actions we shouldn't do. I'm saying that in the future, a wave of automation will hit human beings, so we will automatically be more a mind than a body, right? And so right now we don't have a proper value exchange system for we have a proper value exchange system for physical, for objects, but in regards to subjective realm, it's very hard. I even thought about it that there's going to be so many human beings. Like, think about it. It's like, imagine it's one roller coaster, and throughout history, everybody's coming. They are born and they get on this roller coaster, and at some point they get off the roller coaster. And it's like their philosophy or whatever is how they are on the roller coaster currently. And think of how many different people in a theme park could have a review on the roller coaster ride. Think of all the different ways. So philosophy doesn't really belong to the individual. It's at best an exploration for the species. So this means the individualism of the human being must be revalued. And it will be. It will change so dramatically in the next couple hundred years. And when I say change, that means it has no choice. It will get so bored. I'm saying the reason we're going to evolve is because we're going to get bored. We're going to be these individuals who begin wondering about the presence of fields behind our eyes. And that's when we're going to realize the mystics were onto something. The cool thing is that civilization is a bit like Lego. History, like a lot of things, it's like, what's cool about languages? Their alphabets don't update, but at the same time, if we become such an advanced communicating species, we might suddenly have a situation where the letters of the alphabet never stopped, and endless, endless, sort of endless advancement of the language ad infinitum. It's like, you know, there's always anything can update if you look at it long enough. Anyways, guys, I'm going to bring the talk to an end. Thank you for listening this far. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. But I'm going to respond in typing because of the noise. So thanks for listening. This is the Q&A portion for a couple of minutes. Anybody has a question? So, guys, a question has come. Diluted says, how do you explain how corporations use psychology? You see, that question is so different, is so complex to answer because there's so many different types of corporations because the corporation is limited to the market. The corporation needs to survive in the marketplace. So it's making decisions based on that. That means when you're a small company, maybe you don't have time to really care for your employees, but when you become a bigger company, then you have time to care for your employees. So you create some sort of contract for the employees to endure this far, and I don't know, some sort of insured reward or something. So I don't know. I don't like. Here's the thing. I can't give too much of a fixed answer, but generally how I perceive it is that if the employee doesn't know where the captain is steering the ship, the employee is gonna become either corrupt or is not gonna give a shit about being on the ship. Right? So if you're like a football team and you're a soccer player who has the ball and nobody knows what you're doing, you might be a skilled soccer player, but you're also being an inefficient one. So I have a totally different view. That means I haven't started a company yet. At least the infrastructure for it. But like the idea is like if I had a company, it would have to come from skill. You see, people are it's like the employer and the employee. I don't know. It's too big of a question. I can't respond. But I think the way it can improve, I hilariously, and one thing I was like, they need to have a Zen master in every corporate space, just a Zen master. The Zen master doesn't even speak English. Maybe there needs to be a translator there. You know, and the Zen master just hits a gong in the middle of the corporate space. Imagine a bunch of cubicles. The Zen master comes with a gong, and they turn off all the lights in the room of in the workspace. All the people with their cubicles, all the light is turned off, and then comes bong, bong, this like ancient gong sound, and everybody has to be still and silent in that moment, for a moment. I don't know, because tensions build up. The value of the employee is how comfortable the employee is and how inspired the employee is. That means, like, a question many employers didn't even ask, like, when I experienced it, is like, why do you care for this company? I didn't have employers really ask that question, And that's a smart employer. When the employer wants to understand why you want to go and exist in that space. You see, this is your life. Now, the life has a value. Sometimes you got to endure through suffering to make it big. Sometimes you shouldn't even think about winning or losing. Just try to perform at a high skill level, at an advanced skill level at every moment. Just attempt your best pretty much every moment. Doesn't matter if you're drinking a glass of orange juice. Drink it in the most greatest way you know. So I don't know. I would say the corporate psychology, it's based on the leader. I said something at the beginning that the leader places the ladder and the managers do it. So the evolution of corporate psychology has to do with the conversation the management of the company has with the leader, where the leader is like the captain of the ship. Because it's a capitalistic society. That means you choose to work. When you go get a job, you're choosing to accept that responsibility. And every work has a hazard. It's kind of like the same hazard if you just wear a watch every day. It's like a chunk of metal weight on your left hand. Why? So over time, things. It depends. I feel that if the crew member of, even it was like in I don't know, like Star Trek, bringing Star Trek into corporate culture. I don't know. If the person knows where they're going, they're going to feel more comfortable working. If the person doesn't know the outcome, they're going to feel bad. But the issue is, if the outcome depends on the employee, then the inner realms of the employee, it's the passion. Like, let me tell you, there's this person named Kevin O'Leary, and I read his book, and he's written this great book, and in it, he was saying he was like, it was the beginning of his career and going into sales and whatnot, and he was selling cat food, and he was in a pitch, and the person's like, is this safe for humans, the cat food? And Kevin O'Leary eats the cat food in front of the people and instantly eats it comfortably and says, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Like an Oscar-winning performance of a sales pitch, you know? And the deal is made, and it's good business, even though he got sick afterwards or something, you know. But the thing was, in that moment, uh, this noise is too much, I think. There was a sort of effort. There was an inspiration where he wanted to. He was doing something not because that was his nature. He was doing something to get somewhere. You know, and when we realize the motivation of all human beings behind their eyes is that they want to get somewhere. So I would say a conscious corporation would be a corporation that asks the human being, how are you comfortable to work? Because the system is, again, human beings have different DNA, different ways of being intelligent in the moment, different levels of ethical consideration. There's so many different types of people on this world. So the system has to be cruel to those who could be corrupt in the system, but the system has to also be very kind to those who are actually paying an effort, you know? So anyways, that's what I can share diluted so far. But it's a good question. I might give a talk later. I'll make a note of that. Corporate psychology. I mean, honestly, it's like how much the captain of the ship cares for the people. That's it, really. Robert Bolender says, what would be a good way to get a better understanding of your talks? Um, First, I advise people, I mean, don't listen to more than one or two. I have never felt too much of a sense to kind of promote these talks. I kind of had this feeling when somebody builds something, like imagine you just started building your own tower, and as you build your own tower, eventually people would see the tower. So I kind of concluded I need to spend no time in sharing this. It's like people's eyes would kind of notice something here and maybe engage it. But I would tell you the best way to listen to my talks, in my whole talks, I'm trying to tell you that language is a mirror of your experience. So the best way you can hear my talks is hear them and then stop caring for language only and just have a 10 to 20 minute of anywhere, wherever, even if you're in the middle of your work, just for 10 minutes, just don't do anything and watch the moment. The mind has a settling effect, because the point is not exchanging, what is this, we're trading ideas like cards, you know? It's not about ideology, one idea knows better. It's about 8 billion human beings on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and what is their conclusion of the greatest, most efficient thing they can do. We see all these birds fly. So the best way you can listen to my talks is wonder about your own eyes and its greatest questions. Because for me, believe it or not, from my angle, this is an art project. I remember hearing this sentence, I don't know who said it, but the person said, when your art goes out into the public, it's no longer your art. That means I've seen reality in a certain way, my moment is being experienced in a certain way, and I give the talk, but how your eyes hear my talk, I could tell you, just hear at your own discretion. Here at your recognition that your experiences are lighting the meaning of your eyes. That's what I'm saying. So if you become aware of your inner realm, at that point your own mind will fascinate you so much that you don't need to hear my talks. You're going to go experientially navigate. You're gonna suddenly realize that fear was man-made. But if there's something beyond man, the presence of humanity, the vision of humanity, I don't know, you gotta find something in this void. You know? It's like I totally blame, it's like I think the normal stage, we should all be freaking out. I think subconsciously we're all like, oh my god, there's emptiness here. It's like, what do we do with all this emptiness? Where do we put it? The outer space, it's rooted in the inner space. The inner space is rooted in the outer space. It's a temporary performance of how far your intelligence saw the world and chose to be in it. So many people see this world and they dislike it. You know, out of curiosity, like, out of all the listeners, how many of them they look at the world and they get a feeling like they like their world? How many people look at this world and feel they don't like it, they dislike it, out of curiosity? If people who are listening could give an honest answer. Or there could be a view where you have seen too much of its movement, where there is an opinionless view as well. That means when the good becomes aware of the bad, it is no longer just good. When the bad becomes aware of the good, it's no longer just bad. They are codependent. It's like wondering how you are being a thought right now. And tell me if language isn't, the skin of the ego. So I would say just trust your intelligence. I mean, you got to think. That's why I think the point of these talks are just to show how if 8 billion human beings decided to care for their inner realms, it could be a very accelerated movement towards civilization. Because I was thinking scientists are studying visible patterns, but the inner realms, imagination, this is how you're subject to yourself. This is like a pattern. The scientists are studying patterns in the outer realm. These are patterns in the inner realm, and unless vocalized, this pattern remains in the inner realm alone. That means if the person doesn't move, they can't be an individual. So you gotta at some point sit down in this life and wonder about, all right, what's my effort gonna be towards it? What is it gonna mean to me? And if you are content with the unknown, you have reached wisdom's end. But if you are still pursuing, if you're trying to make the outer world, if the inner, here's the thing, if the moment is present. That's the simplest explanation. And then how we move is the animation of the story. If you do a good thing, society looks at you and says, oh, this guy's good. You do a bad thing, people say, well, society's like, no, this guy's bad. And then you realize that everybody is just inner realm painting over the outer realm. So the healthiest way civilization and work should be progressed is as art. When we see everything as art, then we are free from the past. But if we want art to like for me personally, religion is like 6th century art. It is very unique. Art comes from an unknown place, you know. It's like the artist reveals the color on the canvas, you know. So when I look at different ideas, they are like artwork. It's like, what can you do about a tree in your yard? It's just a design in your perception. What do you do about a painting of the Mona Lisa in the Louvre? It's just a design in your perception. What do you do about what you see in the mirror? Is that just a design in your perception, or is that the designer? Anyways, I don't know. I would say listen to life naturally, whether it's my voice or anything else. Because you can't honor your inner realms until you serve them, and you won't care to honor your inner realms until your mind fascinates you. Once you get that glimpse of fascination from your own mind, your own vision surprises you. It's as if you begin to realize that it's like we don't know that much about the mind, and we may think that's a disadvantage, but that's also an incredible advantage of how much exploration there is. Because the value of the person in corporate culture, somebody asked earlier, is that their work is only valuable to the company. But if somebody could do something where the work is valuable to themselves, like that's why I could say Joe Rogan was an inspiring figure for me. Why? Because this man found a way to make his work have a value more than just work the next day. You see, and I feel that we should now is a time where, strangely, we don't know that much about the human being, and if the filmmaking industry, goes 50-50, 50 go as crazy as you want, 50 care for the accuracy of the education of the work. Because I'm telling you, there's going to be this sort of infusion of the economical sector with the educational system and the technologies from the film sector infusing. I feel in the future, teachers are just going to be holograms. That means the business is going to be like, why am I bringing in a teacher? Why don't I just have a hologram of the ultimate teacher? You know? Can you imagine in the future you go to a school and you ask the teacher every question and the teacher answers and you realize the school has connected the teacher's head to an AI. So you've been technically schooled by AI, Like, I'm just thinking that would be an interesting sci-fi story. So yeah, anyways, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for the questions. It's an incredibly hot day. Albert Camus said, in the depths of summer, in the depths of winter I found within me, in the depths of winter I found within me an invincible summer. This is going to say, in the depths of summer I found within me an invincible, winter. And winter, imagine it's a beer company. I don't know, guys. There's something about creative space that just evokes its own path. Nobody knows what nobody knows. The unknown is everywhere. We hold ourselves as an ideological container of a knower. We live through this life through various memories. What are our memories? Access the ways we have been a self in an environment. So every person's mind is a strange storehouse of various ways they've been a self. So your mind is accumulating animate patterns of how to be animate. When it attempts to be animate, when you choose to do something, whatever it is, but you choose to do it yourself, just you. This sort of kind of solo approach at novelty. You'll begin seeing feedback from you. It's like you require a certain honesty in your realm, so you don't deceive yourself. Because it's like the language has a merit on its own, but the experience definitely surpasses the language. We experience and then we try to put it in words. Even linguistic professors say when the creature was evolving, there was meaning before the language. What does that mean? That means before people had agreed to a common language, like, I don't know, let's say the caveman saw a rock falling on the other caveman, was like, oh, like some sort of grunt, So there was meaning. The inner realms were ignited, but they weren't maintainable. They weren't strong enough to become responsible for the outer realms. Now the inner realms very quickly become responsible for the outer realms, and we go on living our life as a character in an endlessly changing story. It's like, when I was young, they asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And there was something very interesting, because I was like It's like you should ask that question. Not I didn't think of this then, but I was like when I thought about that question, I was like, it all depends on where the world is and what's in the world. And we have technologies popping out every day. You know, the news is choosing to show the tragedy. Do you know how many advancements there are going on? Do you know how many musical prodigies are born? We have to create a civilization that values the mind, and the mind is the unknown potential of the collective movement of all minds. And so the question is, shall we see the phoenix of civilization? How many are willing to fly long enough? How many are willing from their inner heavens to step down and help advance this science project that's been left here after 4 billion years? This is Mr. Within's argument to why we should build an advanced civilization. Because we can. You know? Because it's worth seeing how far the eyes of the species goes, not just the eyes of a thought to itself for 100 years, then it's like back into nature's ocean, the iceberg melts. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Inspire the communities around you to care for the value of communication. It is the greatest escape rope we have as a civilization. I mean, think about it. If a bunch of aliens were watching us from an aerial view, from like, I don't know, 200 meters in the sky, it would be our communication, it would be our activity, it would be our art and creativity that will show them that there's something here. And civilization shifts. There's points where the concept feels unknown, the context feels unknown, and there's moments where the concept feels unknown and the context feels known. All those people who feel, for example, they have past lives, that is in some sense being in one moment and feeling yourself as a concept of that moment, but suddenly in your inner realms, that same concept is getting a different context. So it's like the inability to discriminate that attention is not an image can make the attention be any image. So you have to realize there's a wilderness that nobody has your eyes to know what is best for you. But you have your eyes, so, you know. Walk on the carpet of sensory perception laid out for you, with honor. Much blessings and namaste.